Hello guys, and welcome to my week 10 prediction video, as well as thoughts. I'm going to do it in the same order this week, where I'm going in the order of like relevance, which pertains to like the competition, the team's records, and implications I to the end of the season and to playoffs. And with that, we will start with what I'm assuming is going to be a crazy lowly viewed game, starting very early, where the Giants play the Panthers in Germany. Now, looking at this game, we obviously have Daniel Jones against Bryce Young. Bryce Young still starting. The Panthers, crazy enough, looking at their depth chart after their trade, they only have three active wide receivers because Thielen is on IR. So it's like, what is their offense going to look like? I think that they're going to have to try and run it a lot. I don't think they're going to have a lot of success against a Giants defense that just, they perform pretty well against the run. They have a feisty defense that has been keeping them in games this year. And even on the offensive side, I think Daniel Jones has performed better. I think, he obviously has Slayton and then, his rookie wide receiver Neighbors, who's, a baller, and their running back, um, Tracy. And looking at this game, I just feel like the Giants have a lot more to lose than the Panthers. The Panthers are essentially kind of just trying to string things together and do things offensively to kind of gauge what they have in Bryce Young after he sat for a little bit. Obviously, it's kind of hard to assess his talent when it's like the only weapon he has, who really maybe can prove that they're reliable is Xavier Leggett. And obviously, with three wide receivers that are pretty unproven, what are the Panthers going to do? I'm taking the Giants in this game for obvious reasons that I think the Panthers defense just I'm not convinced, and they seem to have taken a step back with a good amount of young talent. Moving on to the next game. No, this isn't a personal vendetta, but I put this as the next most irrelevant game of the week with Patriots visiting the Bears. Obviously, the Patriots, we have Drake May um, going to play this game. He's out of concussion protocol. I think he's done some good things. I think he gets it to everybody. And I think he's just overall a good distributor of the ball, and he throws a good football. Now, because of his banged up O line, I don't think he's going to be afforded the luxury to do that sort of thing. And the O line's been questionable. Obviously, he's done some amazing things with his legs recently, including being the leading rusher for his team and throwing the ball very well. But this Bears defense, even last week when they were missing Montez Sweat last week, I'm pretty sure against the Cardinals, they were still playing pretty well. It's just the offense did nothing last week on the Bears. Now, I think the Bears are kind of what I expected them to be, up and down. Caleb Williams clearly doesn't look, very polished as much as like Jaden Daniels, and their run game is off and on. And they've got, a lot of obviously weapons, that are very solid, but just underperforming. And people can blame the O line. They are missing both of their starting tackles. But at the end of the day, it's like you shouldn't be missing guys that are like wide open and just throwing air mail to them that's, uncatchable and that sort of thing. but I'm gonna go with the Bears on this one. They obviously are the better team, and I just feel like they just drastically underperformed last week, even with them being inconsistent. But moving on to the next game, we have Vikings Jaguars. Now, this game I would have put, I don't know if I would have ever put it that much higher because the Jacksonville Jaguars, to me this year, have crazily underperformed. Their defense is really bad, their offense is really bad, and apparently, even though Trevor Lawrence is questionable, they're saying that he's more than likely not going to play this game. So we might get to see Mac Jones make his Jaguars debut, in Jacksonville. And it's like the Vikings last week, everyone knows they played a doozy of a game against the Colts, who just looked lost and they just were blowing coverage. They weren't playing good offensively either. Mainly Flacco not really throwing it to like the right guy a lot of the times, but they kind of got handed a win last week after, they lost their previous two in 5 days when, before, and they were undefeated before that. So the Vikings, well, at 6-2, I'm just kind of like, I'm not convinced, but I think that, they have the chance to just steamroll the Jaguars, who last week, they were dominated by the Eagles, did have a crazy surgence like late in the third and then the fourth, to try and come back in that game. But overall, the Jaguars are just, they're kind of the same. They're way too sporadic on offense, where it's like it comes in chunks, but not consistent play. And who knows if Trevor Lawrence isn't playing? I mean, even if he is, I still think that they lose this game. So I'm giving this game to the Vikings. Moving on, we have Titans Chargers. I think this is only more relevant of a game because the Chargers are vying for a playoff spot, obviously. And if you lose against a team like the struggling Titans, then, that's really going to, like, be bad for your playoff hopes, going 5-4, especially since you're at home. But Herbert to me has been playing really well. He's got good chemistry with his young wide receivers, and he's dishing the ball and not playing risky ball. And then the Titans, they just haven't been playing well. Even their defense has had like run liability after they started off the year being really well. And it's like the Chargers, while they haven't been running it as much lately, I think that, they're gonna balance out and they're gonna run it as much as they throw it eventually, or maybe not as much pass heavy, because that is what Harbaugh wants to do. He wants to be able to run the ball and control the game, which Herbert's accurate enough that you can control the game through him, but you do want to keep him healthy if you're gonna make a postseason run, of course, in your first season of coaching the Chargers. But I am, of course, going with the Chargers for the win in this game because I think their season, it's not paramount on this game, but this isn't a game that they should drop. Moving on, we have Falcons Saints. I put this one a bit higher because the Saints and the Falcons are obviously in the same division. So it's a divisional game. It's in New Orleans. New Orleans just fired their head coach. So I think that they're going to have maybe a renewed energy this game. It always seems to happen the game after, your head coach gets fired, that, your team plays a bit with a bit more fire. It usually doesn't last very long, but it plays with a bit more fire. And Atlanta, obviously a star-studded talent on both sides of the ball. Their pass rush isn't the greatest. I think that if Derek Carr isn't getting pressured, he plays like that much better. Obviously, every quarterback does, but Derek Carr especially, he's prone to interceptions when he gets pressured. Just like any other kind of a little bit above average quarterback where that's not mobile and needs to, try to force the ball. But I'm going with the Saints in this game, but I kind of expect it to be one of those games where it's like, it's tough, but it is going to be tough having moved on from Marshawn Lattimore, even though there's not a clear cut number one to me on the Falcons when there clearly should be. It should be Drake London, but he's underperforming. Darnell Mooney's performing well, but he's not a true number one. It's kind of like in limbo on the Falcons. But I'm taking the Falcons in this game while visiting the Saints. Going on to the next game, I'm thinking it's the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys, obviously, where I think that Dallas is obviously starting Cooper Rush. There's talk of Dak Prescott going on IR. Cooper Rush, though, when he played for Dak when he was hurt at the beginning of a season a couple seasons ago, did pretty well. And even when he came in last week, he roughly had kind of the same yards and the same, completions on like close to the same pass attempts. And if it shows that it doesn't matter what QB is in the system, then clearly, and they put up the same kind of yards and that sort of thing, then clearly there is a problem. And the Cowboys, obviously Dak is out. You have CeeDee Lamb. He is healthy after there was kind of a scare with him. Like he looked like he was in a lot of pain last week when he apparently got hurt, but he has no injury designation. So thinking about this game, obviously Micah Parsons is coming back this week too, so it's like they definitely need him. They need him to come out and really, get after Jalen Hurts. Obviously, these two teams are very familiar with one another. I don't think Parsons is going to be enough, and I think it's going to be the Eagles that take this game, obviously. And then you have Dallas, who hasn't won at home, and it's crazy. Through 8 games, they only have 3 home games. But they haven't won at home, and it's like you're about to have a lot of homestand games at the end of the season, obviously, with having played 5 away games already. So it's kind of curious because Dallas, to me, they're not really in playoff contention anymore. This is, going to break the camel's back. But yeah, it just doesn't look good for the Cowboys, which, I'll say it. I love that they finally got their comeuppance, to be honest with you. But yeah, taking the Eagles in this game, even though I think Cooper Rush could bring life where Dak was just not playing well this year. Bills, Colts. The only reason I'm saying that this game is a little bit more relevant is because I think the Colts had, like an odd week last week. It was strange. Flacco, he said that, he feels more confident when he knows that he's the starter as opposed to coming in off the bench, which is funny because he was playing better off the bench. He was actually taking, the smart reads, giving it to the guys who could get first downs. I can't tell you how many times last week it was like, why are you going downfield when you only need this many yards and your halfback is running out and your halfback is Jonathan Taylor? It's not like he's got some weird no-name back that, can't make a play. He's got Jonathan Taylor. But the Bills obviously have played very well this year. And, they have, quite a good team still. I think that Josh Allen and Amari Cooper still need to really develop to make sure that they are a deadly threat come postseason if they're serious about making a deep run or possibly beating the Chiefs, who everyone knows it's on everyone's mind, is beating the Chiefs. And more than likely at a Arrowhead at this turn of the season, unless the Chiefs somehow have a crazy collapse. which I can only see by injury, to be honest with you. And on the defensive side, their offensive side obviously can't sustain that many more injuries for skill players because they're just going to run out of skill players. But overall, I think, the Colts as well, you know, last week was a game you thought they'd compete in. They did not compete at all. And it looks like their division, with the way that it's playing out in the AFC, too many losses beneath 500, and you're going to get your chances of making the playoffs are going to be extremely low. So I think that they're going to put up a fight because this is kind of, it's at home. And, this is kind of maybe their season, the beginning to the end of their season and their playoff hopes. But, the Bills are tough customers. And I do expect Flacco to play better. I know he knows that he has to play better. Otherwise, what's the point? But I'm taking the Bills over Indianapolis. Moving on to Broncos Chiefs. As we know, the Broncos got mollywopped by the Ravens, 41-10. Obviously, the Ravens are a different caliber of team when they're on fire. Lamar Jackson, was throwing the ball crazy well against the Broncos. They contained him, but he still threw really, really well against a good defense. And now this week, the Broncos don't really have to worry about, Mahomes like running all over them, but he can still run, but they've got to keep him in the pocket. They got to play disciplined ball, and it's at Arrowhead. Now, I honestly thought the Chiefs could have had their match in the Buccaneers, but unfortunately, the Buccaneers didn't go for the win with a 2-pointer. Instead went to overtime, and the Chiefs just were like, we refuse to lose type of attitude, which is exactly what I expect from a, back-to-back Super Bowl champions with, the strongest mental in the NFL is what I'm going to say, which I think is what makes the Chiefs the way they are. They have strong mental game, as well as, players that can obviously produce at, the highest level in Chris Jones, Kelsey, and Mahomes. Now, this is a good test for Denver. Obviously, with a loss, they are 5-5, with a possibility to go, win 7 of their last games. Seems like a bit bold, but I think after last week, you kind of see that they lack the talent more than likely to compete with these teams that are well coached, well balanced, and just overall better, than they are in terms of like weapons and opportunity. But I think it's going to be another kind of game where it's like you see what Bo Nix can do with limited. But I think that, he's a smart kid. I don't think this game will base too much about his future, but maybe you can see how well he can play against a defense that is, the best in the NFL, I'll say it, because, their defense has essentially won them just about every game. But I'm taking the Chiefs in Arrowhead. Now, Jets Cardinals. The reason I put this one so high is because obviously the Cardinals are division leaders, and the Jets kind of wowed us in their last game against the Texans. Now, if they can play that well and maybe click a little bit more on offense, I think the Jets can make a run at the postseason. And we all knew going into last week it was do or die, and it is still do or die. Now, the Cardinals obviously have won their last their last 3, and some of them have, a couple of them were come back from behind, and then last week they just dominated a Bears team that looked lost and completely outcoached. But the way that I think that this game is going to play out is I think that the Cardinals are going to really struggle because I think Sauce against, Harrison is kind of a crazy good matchup. They're both taller guys. Sauce has crazy cover skills, but he's been playing a little bit worse than what we're used to this year. But I think he's really going to kind of put his foot down and dominate Harrison this game, who is obviously their wide receiver one at this point. The first few weeks, it was kind of up in the air. He was getting touchdowns, but not a lot of yards. But he is their guy. And him and Murray obviously have a special connection. But I think the Jets defense is prepared, and they started to kind of play a little bit better against the Texans. And who knows whether or not that is because, the Texans didn't really have any wide receivers, Diggs and Collins out, and Tank Dell obviously, they're kind of, essentially their main guy because, you know, the other two are out. But it was uncharacteristically bad from Stroud, and I think even with the loss of those guys, he should be playing better. And I definitely think it was kind of an off game. But I think the Jets have a huge momentum boost, and they're going to take it to the Cardinals. And I'm actually going to be bold, and I'm going to say I think the Jets take this game because they have a little bit too many weapons to me, and the Arizona's just not going to be able to handle that. But moving on, we have Dolphins Rams, the Monday night game. I picked this because I think the Dolphins proved that they can be relevant with Tua. They just happen to go up against a Cardinals team and a Bills team that just barely edged them out. And, it's crazy to think that they could be 4-4, looking ahead at the end of the season and potentially making a run. But I still think this is a team that can make a run. They are not, a terrible team. And obviously, this game kind of holds precedent that like Ramsey and Odell are going to be returning to SoFi with the team they won a Super Bowl with. And they're going to be trying to feed them as much information, at least about the offense, that they know. Obviously, Puka wasn't on that team, but they know how the offense is run. They looked at it for, an entire year, and they, any sort of edge you can get over a guy like Stafford is paramount. Last week, the Rams kind of eked out of a win because of Geno Smith's poor play. And with that being said, obviously Puka had been ejected. Puka is, I believe, playing this game. Let me check real quick. He is playing this game, only a game time, suspension. But I think that, the Rams have just looked really, really good. Demarcus Robinson, their third wide receiver, has kind of emerged, and Sean McVay just seems to really pull the most out of these guys. Not saying that Puka's not talented. Cooper Kupp, obviously very good hands and good route running, but, Demarcus Robinson seems to just find the open field. And it's like Stafford, always going to get those guys the ball, and he's going to, bust his ass to do so. And I think that the Rams defense is playing well this year. I don't think well enough for the Dolphins though. I think that they're definitely not on the same tier as the Bills last week, but I'm going to say that I think the Dolphins win this one with their backs against the wall because they played a crazy good game against the Bills, and the Bills just happened to have the last possession. Granted, they wouldn't have been in that game if, some field goals weren't missed by Bass, but they were still in it, and Tua was playing really well. I'm really happy for him. He looked a little rusty the first week he came back, but he was schooling. And I just think it's a matter of time. And I think that they know that, this could also be the beginning of the end of their season, where their playoff hopes are, go away if they fall too far down, you know, with only having won 2 games and being in the AFC. So I'm going to take the Dolphins, which I'm going to say is an upset. But they do say this is, there's only one, the Rams only are a 1 point favorite. So it seems like more of a toss up game on Monday night. So I'm going to take them, and I think that they can, wreak some havoc on the Rams, who are also competing to try and get first in their division, in a division that is, the closest knit division in football. But the only team with 5 wins being the Cardinals. Moving on, we have Steelers Commanders. Never in a million years would I have thought this game would be high on the relevancy list, at least in my opinion. Pittsburgh, people keep saying that Russell Wilson's back. He's doing good. Oh, he looks good. And I'm going to say I'm still a skeptic. He didn't, when he went to Denver, obviously he looked pretty much bad the whole time in both seasons. But like when he was his final years with the Seahawks, he would start hot and then he'd simmer down and he'd look crazy bad. And I think that he goes up against a team like the Commanders that if he's going to do checkdowns all day, the Commanders are going to eat them alive. That is all I'm going to say. And I'm saying that because they are well coached by Dan Quinn. They don't really let guys free from tackles. And they're very disciplined. They may not have the most talented defense, but you can just sense that they aren't giving up an inch. They are playing for every inch on every field. And if if Russell Wilson cannot throw it down the field consistently, he cannot do what needs to be done to beat this team. He does have a good defense backing him up, but I think that from what we've seen from Jayden Daniels, he's elusive enough, he's tough enough, he's smart enough. And it's like, and obviously, knock on wood, obviously TJ Watt can have a really good game. They just traded for Preston Smith and Mike Williams at the trade deadline, this last week to really bolster their team. So, yeah, it gives Russell Wilson another kind of, pass catcher that's similar to Cortland Sutton and Mike Williams, where it's like they're possession guys, they're bigger guys, and overall, I mean, they clearly needed more ammunition, because I think that, just Wilson throwing it up to Pickens every game and hoping that, he goes up and he makes every contested catch is not a formula for victory. And I think that, this is another game that I don't think Najee Harris and Warren are going to be able to just pound all game. Because like I said, the Commanders' defense is tough and they're well coached. So looking at this, I think it's going to come down to QB play. Like I said, I just don't trust after 2 games that the Steelers that Russell Wilson is just fixed and he's going to play lights out like he's taking this team to the Super Bowl. And like I said, he does a lot of dump off passes, which is what he did last year. And he had a crazy high, completion percentage and rating, but it's like they didn't win games that way because teams that are, smart, they're just going to play up on the ball. And you can't tell me, after the Commanders had traded for Marshawn Lattimore, he's a scrappy guy. And he's going to be able to get feisty with Pickens, get into his head. Marshall Lattimore, that's part of his skill set to me, is that he's very good at getting under the wide receiver skins. And Pickens, clearly a young wide receiver, that's kind of ripe for the picking. But I'm taking the Commanders in this game because it is at home. They're undefeated at home. They obviously had that crazy game against the Bears where they, it was crazy close type of thing. But they've played against good defenses this year, and they haven't really faltered that much. So I'm taking the Commanders in this game over Pittsburgh. And now, going to Sunday Night Football, we have Lions going to Houston to take on the Texans. Nico Collins is on IR, but I think that they activated him off of it. So I think that, he's questionable to play in this game, which is huge. Obviously, a lot of people have been talking about how the Lions secondary is much improved, that sort of thing. Last week they played my Packers, and my Packers essentially kind of lost the game to themselves. The defense only gave up 17 to the Lions, who had been averaging 40 the 3 previous games. They were on absolute fire offensively. And the Packers, whose defense I wouldn't say is even the best, and they even got kind of, scorched by Trevor Lawrence a little bit after a couple of guys went down with injury. But it's like, to do that kind of work against Detroit, I just think it's undeniable. And I think that Houston has an even better pass rush than the Packers for sure. Like, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter have been producing better than the Packers pass rush. So I think that they can get some much needed pressure on Goff, who, isn't the most mobile guy. And I think that, Houston's disciplined. I think that they're going to play kind of a similar style where they're preparing for the run, but they're going to execute it better than the Packers. There was just a couple of Packers plays, like the running touchdown, that were just completely blown up and complete miscues. But I think that Houston, I think that, these guys have been playing under that system now. It's their second year under DeMeco Ryans. And I think he is, a good head coach that's kind of had a rockier season than what we're accustomed to, but this team is still 6-3. So one of these teams is going to have their perfect home or away record ruined. And I'm actually going to take the underdog in this game. And I'm going to say that the Texans are going to win. And my whole reasoning for that is that I think that they're kind of a team that's built to take on a team like Detroit, where they have pretty good cornerback play, especially from Petrie, who's their slot corner. And I think he can square up well with St. Brown. Obviously, this game you have Jamal Williams coming back from his suspension, I'm pretty sure. It was a 2-game suspension that he had. And yep, he's back in the lineup. So it's like you have Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams back. And then obviously Sam Laporta are their 3 main receiving weapons. And, newly acquired Zadarius Smith to kind of bolster their pass rush. But we'll see how well he plays just right off the bat. And looking at this game, I think that the Texans match up pretty well against the Lions. And the Lions, while last week they were like, oh, they have a really good run defense, Josh Jacobs was doing well, and I think Joe Mixon can do the same. That it looks like he's running stronger each week since coming back from his injury. Like, I think he really wants to prove he still has it and give this team their best chance to win. And with him, Stroud, and then Collins playing, I think that they can make magic happen. And obviously with Collins back, that's going to take pressure off of Tank Dell, who is going to perform better because of that. So I'm taking the Texans because I think I think at home, I think that they can work some magic, and I think that they're really looking to get past that disappointing loss against the Jets. That was just overall a kind of complete failure by their team. But with that being said, those are my picks for this week. Picked a couple of upsets that I think are possible. I don't really want to just go with the grain on all these guys. Obviously, at this point in the season, we're kind of at the point where we know who teams are and that sort of thing. But if you guys want to discuss what you think is potentially going to happen in a certain matchup, or talk about like what players you think are going to pop off this week, feel free to leave those down in the comments. But if you want more NFL content like this, please subscribe. I would appreciate it a lot. And leave a like. It helps the video and the algorithm. But this is Cast, and I am your host, Cass. And as always, go Pack Go.